An offshore oil rig can cost over $650 million to build and burn up to $1 million a day just to keep running. When it strikes oil, that same steel giant can earn $400,000 to $700,000 in daily leasing fees. But when the drill stops, the losses come just as fast. In the North Sea, one storm can idle a rig for weeks. So how does anyone profit from a machine that bleeds money every single day it sits still? The answer starts with the price tag. A modern deepwater drillship is not a platform bolted to the seabed. It is a floating industrial city, and building one costs between $650 million and well over $1 billion. That single number defines every decision the owner will ever make. For that money, you get a vessel that never sleeps. Some ultra-deepwater rigs house crews of 150 to 200 people working in shifts around the clock. There are galleys, sleeping quarters, medical bays, power plants, and drilling systems capable of punching through miles of rock beneath miles of water. Consider a vessel like the Deepwater Titan, delivered to Transocean in 2023 at a reported cost near $1 billion, rated to drill in 12,000 feet of water and equipped with 2 blowout preventers instead of 1. Its derrick can hold more than 2.5 million pounds of hook load, and its thrusters burn through tens of thousands of gallons of fuel a day just holding position against current and wind. And a town like that is not thrown together in a season. Construction can take 3 years at specialized shipyards, many in South Korea, where the largest offshore vessels take shape. Yards like Samsung Heavy Industries in Gyeonggi and Hyundai Heavy Industries in Ulsan have built the majority of the world's advanced drill ships, some stretching 750 feet from bow to stern and displacing over 60,000 tons. 3 years of steel, engineering, and capital tied up before the rig earns a single dollar. So the moment it launches, the pressure to make it pay begins immediately. Here is where most people misunderstand the business. The companies that own these rigs do not sell oil. They rent the rig itself. Drilling contractors like Transocean and Valaris own the steel, and energy companies pay them to drill. The oil belongs to someone else. The way they charge is deceptively simple. It is called a day rate. In 2023 and 2024, day rates for high-specification drill ships ran from $400,000 to over $500,000 for every day the rig works. The client pays for time, not for barrels. In July 2023, Transocean announced a contract off Brazil at $495,000 a day, and by 2024, a handful of leading-edge fixtures pushed past $500,000, the first time the market had seen those numbers since before the 2014 crash. At those rates, a single working day can bring in more than the median American household earns in a decade. Those clients are the biggest names on Earth. Contracts get signed with majors like Shell, ExxonMobil, and Petrobras, companies with the reserves to justify spending $500,000 a day. The contractor supplies, the machine, and the crew. The major supplies, the geology, and the risk of what lies below. Petrobras alone accounts for a large share of global deepwater demand, operating dozens of wells in the pre-salt fields off Brazil, where oil sits beneath more than a mile of water and thousands of feet of salt. ExxonMobil's Guyana campaign in the Stabroek Block, discovered in 2015, has kept multiple drill ships booked for years, chasing more than 11 billion barrels of estimated recoverable oil. But a single day at a time is a nervous way to run a billion-dollar asset, which is why the real prize is length. A multi-year deal can span 3 to 5 years, locking in guaranteed income before a well is even drilled. Do the arithmetic and the appeal is obvious. A single 5-year contract at $450,000 a day exceeds $800 million in total value. That is enough to cover much of the rig's original construction cost from one agreement. It turns a terrifying gamble into something a bank will actually finance. This is why investors obsess over one word: backlog, the total value of contracts a company has already secured. Backlog is often measured in billions, and it is the clearest signal of whether a driller will survive the lean years. By the end of 2024, Transocean reported a backlog of roughly $9 billion, the largest in the offshore drilling sector, while rivals scrambled to build multi-year cushions of their own. A fat backlog is a fortress. An empty one is a countdown. But before any revenue arrives, the rig has to physically get to the job, and that journey is its own expensive ordeal. Rigs are towed or carried at speeds under 6 knots, barely faster than a person can jog. That crawl costs real money. Mobilization can take weeks and run into millions of dollars before the drill bit touches the seabed. For the longest hauls, giant heavy-lift vessels like the Dockwise Vanguard carry entire rigs across the world on their decks like cargo. The Vanguard, delivered in 2013, measures 275 meters long and can lift up to 110,000 tons, submerging its own deck to slide beneath a rig before rising to carry it away. A single transport from a Singapore yard to a field off West Africa can take 6 weeks and cost the client tens of millions before drilling even begins. Every mile is expense with no income, so the meter starts running in the red. And once the rig arrives, a new enemy is already waiting, one that never signs a contract and never takes a day off: the sea itself. The harsh marine environment demands relentless, expensive maintenance because saltwater and North Sea storms accelerate steel corrosion and grind away at metal fatigue every hour of every day. Fighting that decay is a legal obligation, not a choice. Rigs undergo special periodic surveys roughly every 5 years, exhaustive inspections that can pull a vessel out of service. A single special periodic survey can take a rig offline for 30 to 60 days and cost $10 to $25 million in yard work, class inspections, and equipment overhauls, all while the vessel earns nothing. Classification societies like DNV and the American Bureau of Shipping certify the results, and their inspectors crawl through ballast tanks and test every safety valve. Skip the upkeep and the rig loses its certification, its insurance, and its right to work. So the maintenance never stops. None of that comes cheap. Maintenance and crew costs alone can run near $200,000 to $300,000 per day, whether the rig is drilling brilliantly or waiting on weather. That figure is the floor beneath everything. It is the reason downtime is so lethal, but we will come back to that. Corrosion is not the only threat that shapes the budget. There is a second cost that grew out of catastrophe, and it changed the industry forever. Safety is now both a moral necessity and one of the largest line items on any rig. In 2010, the Deepwater Horizon exploded in the Gulf of Mexico. The blowout killed 11 men and unleashed the worst marine oil spill in American history. Over 87 days, an estimated 4.9 million barrels of crude poured into the Gulf, fouling more than 1,300 miles of coastline from Texas to Florida. It cost BP over $65 billion in cleanup, fines, and settlements. No one in this business has forgotten that number. That is why the equipment guarding against it is so extreme. A blowout preventer, the last line of defense against an uncontrolled well, weighs hundreds of tons and costs tens of millions of dollars on its own. Modern stacks stand 5 stories tall, weigh around 400 tons, and pack hydraulic rams that can shear through drill pipe and seal a well against pressures exceeding 15,000 pounds per square inch. It sits on the seabed, waiting to slam a well shut in seconds. It is insurance made of steel, and it is not optional. And Deepwater Horizon was not the first lesson written in blood. In 1988, the Piper Alpha platform in the North Sea caught fire and killed 167 men in one of the deadliest offshore disasters ever. Of the 226 men aboard that night, only 61 survived, many by leaping more than 100 feet into a burning sea. The subsequent Cullen inquiry produced 106 recommendations, every one of them adopted by the industry. The tragedy rewrote North Sea safety law from the ground up. Every survivor of the modern industry operates under rules those men paid for. All of that danger has to be priced somewhere, and it lands squarely on insurance. Premiums reflect the extreme risk of the work, turning coverage into one of the largest fixed costs an owner faces. A hull and machinery policy has to insure an asset worth hundreds of millions of dollars floating in a place that wants to destroy it. The market for that coverage has a long memory. Premiums surged after Deepwater Horizon and after major storms tore through the Gulf. Hurricanes Katrina and Rita in 2005 destroyed or badly damaged more than 100 platforms and set adrift several rigs, driving offshore energy insurance losses past $15 billion and forcing underwriters to double rates almost overnight. Much of this risk flows to Lloyd's of London, which has historically underwritten offshore energy for generations. When claims spike, everyone's premiums follow. Add it all up, and the rig is a machine with a ferocious appetite that must be fed constantly. Construction debt, maintenance, crews, safety systems, and insurance never pause. Which brings us to the central thread of the entire business, the one that turns all these fixed costs into a weapon aimed at the owner. That threat is downtime. Every idle day, every day the drill does not turn, still costs money. An idle rig still burns more than $150,000 per day in operating expenses. The crews still eat. The steel still corrodes. The insurance still runs. Only the income disappears. And idleness is not rare. Weather delays in the North Sea can idle a rig for weeks, waiting for seas calm enough to work safely. Winter storms there routinely drive waves above 15 meters and gusts past 80 knots, well beyond the limits at which crews can safely run pipe. Equipment failure can force unplanned downtime with no warning, freezing operations while repairs crawl forward. A single failed subsea component can idle a rig for 2 weeks while a replacement is fabricated and shipped, and contracts often specify that the contractor eats the cost of that lost time. Every one of those hours is pure loss. Downtime on a good rig in a good market is painful but survivable. The nightmare comes when the whole market turns, because then the downtime is not measured in weeks, it is measured in years. And that is exactly what happened. When oil prices crash, contracts simply vanish. Between 2014 and 2016, Brent crude collapsed from over $110 a barrel to under $30. Energy companies slashed spending overnight, and drilling programs were canceled across the globe. Global offshore rig utilization fell from above 90% to below 65% in barely 2 years, and the worldwide floating rig count dropped from around 300 active units to fewer than 200. Suddenly, there were far more rigs than jobs. Owners faced an impossible choice. Rather than pay full crews for nothing, they began to stack their rigs, parking them idle in sheltered water. But even a stacked rig is not free. Warm stacking, keeping a rig ready to work again quickly, can cost over $40,000 per day with zero income. The cheaper option is worse in its own way. Cold stacking shuts a rig down almost completely, slashing daily costs, but reactivating it takes months and millions of dollars. Bringing a cold-stacked drill ship back to work can run $40 to $100 million and take 6 months or more, as systems are recertified and a scattered crew is rebuilt from nothing. By 2016, dozens of rigs sat cold-stacked in fjords in Norway and quiet bays off West Africa, riding at anchor with skeleton crews, so owners gambled either way. Pay to stay ready and bleed slowly, or shut down and risk missing the recovery. Neither choice saves you if the downturn outlasts your cash. For many, it did. When downtime dragged on long enough, the debt that built these rigs became a noose. Entire drilling giants, companies that had ruled the seas for decades, collapsed under their own borrowing. The year 2020 was a graveyard. Diamond Offshore filed for bankruptcy that year. Valaris, formed from the merger of Ensco and Rowan into one of the largest fleets on the planet, filed for Chapter 11. Noble Corporation entered bankruptcy in the same brutal stretch. These were the industry's titans, and downtime brought them to their knees. For the rigs themselves, bankruptcy is not always the end. Sometimes there is a final, humiliating fate. An aging rig that can no longer find work faces scrapping, sold off for a fraction of what it cost to create. The old giants are hauled to breaking yards in Turkey and other scrapping sites, where they are torn apart for metal. Yards at Eliaga on Turkey's Aegean coast have dismantled numerous offshore units, cutting hulls into sections with torches and selling the steel by the ton. A rig that costs $650 million to build may fetch only a few million as scrap steel. Dozens of rigs met exactly this end during the 2015 to 2017 downturn. Fortunes reduced to weight. But the industry did not vanish. From that wreckage, a leaner and harder version emerged, and it teaches the real lesson of the whole business. The survivors were the owners with modern, high-specification rigs and disciplined contract coverage. They had the machines clients actually wanted and the backlog to ride out the storm. The proof came in the recovery. By 2024, ultra-deepwater day rates climbed back toward $500,000 as demand returned and the oversupply was gone. Fleets had consolidated, with weaker owners either merged away or scrapped. When utilization rates climb above 90%, it signals a tight market where owners hold the power again. And that word, utilization, is the key to everything you have just heard. It is simply the share of time a rig actually works. A rig near full utilization can generate over $150 million in a single year. The same rig sitting idle is the fastest path from profit to loss there is. Every fixed cost we covered, the debt, the crews, the maintenance, the insurance, all of it keeps grinding whether the drill turns or not. That is the whole equation, stripped bare. IT only pice WHILIT drills. An offshore rig is a marvel of engineering and a monster of expense, and it lives on a razor's edge between the two. The owners who thrive are not the ones with the biggest fleets, but the ones who understand that stillness is the only real enemy. In this business, a machine that never stops is the only machine that ever truly wins. If you enjoyed this deep dive, consider subscribing so you never miss the next one.